Good morning and welcome to Ask the Expert, a daily series from 8:30 a.m. to 9 a.m. to help small businesses. Ask any questions in the comments or using hashtag QBATE, so that's hashtag QBATE on Twitter. If you need any more advice, join the official Intuit QuickBooks SMB community group on Facebook. Accountants and business experts are on hand 24/7. During the live session, we'll be running a poll. So please do engage with that, and I'll share the results with you at the end. So I'm Luke Bath, and I'm one of the partners at the accountancy firm Alliotts. So Alliotts is a medium-sized firm, and we have offices in both central London and Guildford. So we're a full-service firm, apart from insolvency, and there's approximately 100 members of staff and 13 partners, and we've all been working from home since the 13th of March. We're all set up with Office 365 and remote servers, and so we've been relatively unaffected by the shift to work from home. So around 40 years ago, Alliotts was one of the founding members of an international alliance called Alliott Group, which has recently been rebranded as Alliott Global Alliance, which is a network of over 180 independent law firms and accountancy firms in over 75 countries. So because of that group, what that means is a lot of our clients are international in nature or have an international element with their business. So we do serve a lot of UK-based only businesses too, but it might mean that those businesses trade in multiple countries or they're a subsidiary of an overseas big company, that type of thing. And my particular specialisms are outsourcing and corporate finance. Outsourcing for us is essentially where it's really cloud accounting or bookkeeping or whatever you want to call it, but it's where we act as your finance department to a greater or lesser extent. So however much you're comfortable with outsourcing. So outsourcing works particularly well, we find, for young growing businesses where it might not be as cost effective to hire an in-house finance team, but it can be cost effective where you're an established business too. It just depends on how the business operates. And the benefit of that is you get access to constant financial advice from a firm of accountants and obviously a dedicated team. And then just to touch on corporate finance, so corporate finance is basically buying and selling businesses for people, and basically other things such as valuations for share option schemes, sales, things like that, and also the implementation of share option schemes, so things like EMI schemes, which you may have heard of. So essentially, just before we dive into the questions from you guys, I wanted to quickly discuss how to go about preparing your business for the next 6 to 12 months. And then also we'll just quickly recap of the job support scheme that was announced by the Chancellor a few weeks ago. So how best to prepare for the next 6 to 12 months? So my view is that the pandemic has affected some businesses more than others, which I think is fair to say. And also I recognize that if you work in particular sectors or niches, then the pandemic might have actually been okay or beneficial for you. So for example, takeaway businesses, online retail, there are examples of businesses that are actually not been that massively affected. In some cases, they may have benefited from the fact that everyone's working from home. So, but obviously, there are many businesses that have suffered, particularly those that are based at particular premises or hospitality and leisure businesses, for example. And they're the businesses that will suffer the most if there's another national lockdown or further, widespread local lockdowns. So I think in terms of trying to prepare for the next 6 to 12 months, obviously it hugely depends on what your business does. But if you're struggling or you think you're likely to struggle over the next 12 months, I would focus on the following 3 areas as a priority. So funding, cost base, and sales channels. So funding, first of all, the first thing I'd say is, have you fully explored the bounce back and CBILS schemes? Obviously, these schemes have been around for many months now, and it's not desirable to take on debt, particularly when you're not sure if you're going to be able to repay that because you're worried that the business will fail over the next 6 to 12 months, or you're uncertain about the outlook. But if you're of the view that the pandemic situation will have improved by this time next year, so next 12 months, or you've made changes in your business that make you think that trading activity will actually pick up, then it's definitely worth considering the loans. So as many of you will know, over the last few weeks, the CBILS and the Bounce Back Loan Scheme have been extended to the 30th of November 2020, which is great. So there's now more time to apply for these loans. And in my experience, the CBILS loans takes a few weeks takes a bit longer to obtain, and you have to provide more information, but this is obviously because you can obtain up to 5 million in funding with that loan, compared to only 50,000 for the bounce back loan scheme. With the bounce back loan scheme, though, I've seen some clients apply for that, and actually they receive the funds within 2 to 3 days, which is great. But the key thing is, for the bounce back loan, there are no repayments in the first 12 months, and the interest repayments are also paid by the government during that first 12 months. So really, it's well worth considering, even if you're not sure you need the money, because you can just take the money, keep it in a separate account or whatever's suitable for you, and just repay the funds in 9 months, 12 months' time if you don't need it. But if you do need it, then you can obviously draw on those funds immediately. So the second area I mentioned was your cost base. So as winter progresses, my personal view is that the lockdowns will become more prevalent, the local lockdowns that is, and perhaps even we'll have a second national lockdown. So I may have mentioned this in a previous session, but actually I think it's worth considering now whether your cost base is appropriate for the circumstances. So for many businesses, the most significant cost is employee costs. I think because the furlough scheme is ending, most businesses have already considered that, or they've taken steps to consider whether the staffing is actually appropriate anyway. So maybe that's not, a huge area of concern right now. But after employee costs, the second biggest cost is generally rent and rates. And to be honest, there's probably a limited amount you can do about those right now, other than, considering ending leases if you are near the end of your term, or if you use a virtual office, a shared office space, you can, with a rolling contract, you can consider ending that. And if you're a professional, you can work from home, or a consultant. So there's things you can do there, but it's very limited. After that, it very much depends on what your business does. But if you prepare management accounts, or if you do your own bookkeeping, or if you have someone that does these for you, what I would suggest is really spending just an hour or two to sit down and review these, perhaps with your accountant or bookkeeper, and just have a think about whether those costs are really necessary or if they can be reduced. So just go down the P&L and have a real think about the underlying costs. For example, at the moment, we're getting lots of inquiries from businesses that are considering modernizing and outsourcing their bookkeeping, as people just don't realize that you don't need a full-time bookkeeper these days with the technology that's available. So in these times, it's more important than ever that every pound you spend, you feel like you're getting good value from that pound you spend, and also the cost is necessary. So I see businesses that all the time are incurring costs for things that are expensive, or there are cheaper alternatives available. For simple things like electricity and gas, which people actually often change regularly, on an annual basis, on a personal basis. But for their business, they don't evaluate them very often, probably because they don't have the time. But I think it's worth spending the time right now to reevaluate whether there are cheaper alternatives. Things like IT maintenance, support contracts. I'm not singling out IT maintenance, but things like that where you may not be using them very often, and it might be a risk to cancel them, but it's certainly a big cost you maybe would be saving. But certainly spending a few hours to run through the P&L, check whether you're overspending, check whether the money is better deployed elsewhere is another option. It's definitely worthwhile. So my final point would be to consider your sales channels. What I mean by this is that I think for a lot of businesses, they were trading in a very different way pre-pandemic. And a lot of businesses have already adapted because of obviously the national lockdown, and now we've had local lockdowns. But certainly I think it's worth thinking about alternative sales channels for your business that you can take advantage of during a lockdown if there is one. So an obvious example, just picking an obvious example, would be a restaurant that switches to provide takeaway services. And then the next step would be thinking about how to deliver those alternative services. So do I need to sign up for Just Eat, Uber Eats, Deliveroo, that type of thing? Do I need a card terminal? Because previously I've taken cash in the restaurant and it's safer to take card. What's the best way to deliver the service? Do I get a driver, or do I sign up to those platforms that I just mentioned? For businesses that are based at a shop, is it worth selling through a website if you don't have one already? Or if it's just is it worth setting up a website or converting your website to sell through it? So thinking about these type of things pre-lockdown, the real reason I mention these now is because you can advertise your ability to trade through a website, through a lockdown now, in your shop. So you can put up signs or whatever to advertise that you're able to trade through lockdown. And this is what the alternative is going to be if there is a lockdown. Or if you're a restaurant, we're going to switch to takeaway. So don't worry, don't forget about us. You can still order from us type thing. So definitely it's worth thinking about now and setting up now. So just finally, I just wanted to quickly go over the job support scheme very briefly, which was announced by the government a couple of weeks ago. I'm probably sure you've maybe all seen this, but the scheme begins on the 1st of November. So the furlough scheme, the old scheme, ends on the 31st of October. And initially it's going to run for 6 months. Essentially, employees will have to work at least 33% of their usual hours, but for every hour that's not worked of their usual hours by the employee, over that, 33% of their unworked hours will be paid by the government and 33% will be paid by the employer, which means that the employee will receive at least 77% of their usual wage, assuming that the government contribution is capped, because there is a cap. It's around 600, 700 pounds from the government contribution. So obviously, if you're a higher earner, the government contribution will be capped, similar to the furlough scheme. The government's not expecting employers to top up the salary, as with the furlough scheme, because obviously the employee could return to work if so. And crucially, neither the employer nor the employee need to have used the job retention, the previous furlough scheme before. And there's no requirement for the employee to have the same working pattern each month, which is fantastic, really, because it means that employees can cycle on and off the scheme as they need to. So hopefully that was useful. But I think we're ready now to move on to some questions from those of you who are watching. So the first question I have here is from Chloe from Twitter. Chloe's question is, I only began trading in December 2019. Can I apply for the bounce back loan scheme? So Chloe, I'm not sure on the particular date, but I know there is a restriction on the date that you set up the business. Essentially, what I would suggest is you go to the British Business Bank website and have a look at the FAQs for the bounce back loan scheme. If you go on there, there is lots of detail about all the various conditions. So definitely go on there, take a look, see. There definitely is a condition in terms of the trading when you started trading, but it's definitely on there. December 2019 to me sounds okay, but I'm not 100% sure. So I've got a second question here. Clara from Facebook Messenger. So with the uncertainty right now and for the next couple of months / year as a small retail store, what do you think we should think about to prepare for the future? We get customers, but it's not as busy as it was before COVID. So when you say you're a small retail store, I'm assuming that means a physical premises. I'm just going to work on that assumption. So definitely, Clara, biggest cost for you is probably employee costs. Consider whether, because you're a small retail store, I would probably imagine maybe you have 1 or 2 employees or a few employees, but mainly it's done by you. What I would suggest is try and maximize the number of hours you can work, because essentially you can work a lot. You obviously don't have to pay yourself. But really, I appreciate it's probably very difficult. If you reach a situation where there is a local lockdown in your area, I appreciate I made the comments before about setting up a website. I mean, if you set up a website, it would enable you to trade through a lockdown. But really, you've got to think about cutting costs as much as possible. It's thinking about alternative sales avenues and also cutting costs. The biggest cost is employees, as I said before. Rent and rates probably can't do that much about. And then just looking at your other costs, on other things like speaking to your suppliers. So speak to your suppliers, can they offer you longer credit terms? So you're probably on 30 days at the moment. Can you get 60, 90 days, particularly if they're bigger, larger companies? If you can show that actually, you're not in danger of going out of business, but actually your cash flow is struggling, then, perhaps they'll be willing to give you longer credit terms. I think that's worth exploring. So, got a second question here. Another question from Ace from Instagram. So it's a direct message. Good morning. Do you know how long the reduced VAT for hospitality will be in place for? I don't off the top of my head, Ace. I know there is a specified period. I feel it may be 6 months, but I'm not sure if that's been extended. Yeah, sorry about that. Again, I think if you do Google reduced VAT rate for hospitality and type in gov.uk, probably one of the first links that will appear there will be the actual government announcement, like the government page for the reduced rate for VAT. I believe it was 6 months, but again, I'm really sorry, I'm not 100% sure off the top of my head. So I've got a question here from Albie from Instagram. So, good morning. With the bounce back loan, do you know how much the interest rate will be after 12 months? So, as I said before, Albie, the interest rate initially is 0 for the first 12 months. And I believe after that, it's an interest rate of 2.5%. I know that the government announced some easings of the bounce back loan a couple of weeks ago. So I just have to double check. Again, guys, with all these questions, I may not have the specifics available for some of these, but if you want to email me at luke.bath@alliotts.com, I can certainly look these up for you. But again, Albie, if you want to go on the British Business Bank website, as I was saying before, definitely the details will all be on there. It's an exhaustive resource on the bounce back loan and the CBILS loan. But yeah, sorry, I think it's 2.5%, but I'm not 100% sure. So we've got another question here from Nora from Facebook Messenger. So, hi Luke, I find it hard as a freelance copywriter as I don't know if I'll get any clients. Businesses seem to have tightened their marketing budget. What's your advice on how I should plan for the next couple of months? So I think as a freelance copywriter, I'm assuming a lot of your work probably comes from referrals or from businesses that have used you before. I think over the next 3, 6, 12 months, actually, if there isn't another national lockdown, businesses probably will become, certainly February, March time next year, I think businesses will become a lot more positive. Kind of the uncertainty will lift a bit. Hopefully the COVID cases will start to go down. So I think by then marketing budgets might have started to relax a bit, and people will start to spend and on trying to grow again rather than in survival mode again, if you like. But yeah, I think it's just reaching out to your contacts, to people you've worked with before, maybe trying to offer discounted rates to kind of get in with new clients. I'm just trying to think really what you could do. So yeah, discounted rates is a good one for working with new businesses. And certainly one of the things I do as an accountant is with my contacts is always trying to stay visible. So if you can post free content, or you can provide contacts with free content, or you can be useful to them, even if you're not charging for it, it kind of shows your value up front. And offering discounted rates is a great way to get new clients on board. But staying visible, so calling people that would normally refer to work to you, speaking to them, seeing if anyone can give you any work, even if it's at a discounted rate. Because I think essentially the next 3 to 6 months is just about survival as a business, again, unfortunately, especially as the case numbers increase. So I've got another, hopefully that was useful, Nora. So I've just got another question here from Brandon from Facebook Messenger. So, hi, I want to apply for the bounce back loan, and I'm currently on a waiting list with my bank, Starling Bank, where they will review if I can apply. If they decide I can't apply, is there any other support to get? I have a limited company. So, Brandon, what I would say is, if Starling Bank decline your kind of application for the bounce back loan, but you actually think you meet the conditions, it might not necessarily be that they don't want to. I've read a few things about Starling Bank where they're not sure. They've kind of tightened the restrictions on offering bounce back loans. But just so you're aware, there are, with all the other high street banks, if you like, you can apply even if you don't have an account. So certainly with HSBC, I've done that for a client where they had, I think it was a Revolut or a Monzo account. and they wanted to apply for a bounce back loan, but they couldn't through them. So we applied through HSBC, and essentially they open a holding account and pay you to your regular bank account with Starling or Revolut or Bonzo or whatever. But certainly I'd consider doing that if you think you meet the conditions. If actually you're not able to obtain the bounce back loan, I presume you have a very new business. In terms of this government support, if you Google coronavirus government support, the government pages are exhaustive, and I think actually now they have, you can select what kind of category you fall into. So I'm a small business, for example, and you can look there at all the various different support. It is all listed out. It's very useful, actually. It's where I go if I'm uncertain about what support's available for a client. So definitely take a look there. So just Google coronavirus business support or government support. Take a look there. So I've got a question here from Malika I hope I pronounced that right. Sorry if I haven't, from Instagram. So, hello, with the new job support scheme, is there a maximum amount the government will help out with per month? Yes, there is. So I believe, I'm very sorry, my doorbell's just rang. There is I think it's £687 per month, I think. Again, if you Google job support scheme, the government released a fact sheet on the job support scheme, and on the second page, I think it shows the maximum amount they'll contribute per month. But again, as I said before, the employee has to work at least 33% of their normal hours, and then with the remaining 66%, assuming they only work 33% of their normal hours, with the remaining 66 or 67% of their remaining hours, the government will pay 33% and the employer pays 33%. And that's how the scheme works. So hopefully that was useful, Malika. So I've got another question here from Xander from Twitter. So, hey Luke, I might have to let 2 of my 7 employees go as I can't afford to keep them. One of them has been employed since January this year and one since September 2019. Do you know if there's any support they can get from the government? So Xander, I'm assuming that you would be making them redundant. I'm really sorry, I'm not a huge expert on redundancy. I would speak to a HR expert. But I believe certainly for the one that's been employed since January this year, I don't think they get any redundancy pay. Obviously, you have an option to give them a discretionary payment, even if they're not eligible for any redundancy. But in terms of support they can get from the government, I don't think there is anything available. I think it's just essentially universal credit, which is really unfortunate. I'm sorry to hear that you have to let 2 of your employees go. But yeah, sorry, I don't think there is any special support for anyone who's been made redundant. I think the government have announced last week some special training schemes which are worth having a look at that you could point them towards. But apart from that, I don't think there's been any special support announced. So we've got another question here from Nancy from Instagram. So how many years do you have to pay off the CBILS loan? And do you know what the interest rate is? So for the CBILS loan, so with the bounce back loan, there's a fixed interest rate for all bounce back loans. I believe that's 2.5%. For the CBILS loan, it's determined by the bank that is offering the CBILS loan, very much like a normal loan. And actually the term, I think you can negotiate on the term, and the interest rate again is set like a normal loan, which is kind of for smaller businesses, that's one of the other advantages of the bounce back loan. You know what you're getting, you self-certify when you apply. The CBILS, it's like a normal loan application, but obviously, there's the COVID angle that makes it slightly special. But apart from that, it's very much determined by the bank on a risk basis. And the other key thing to mention with the CBILS versus the bounce back is CBILS, you do make capital repayments during the first year. So certainly with some banks. So the interest is still paid by the government for the first year, like with the bounce back loan. But actually, you in most of the banks I've seen, you make capital repayments in the first year. So we've got another question from Kenza from Twitter. So hopefully I pronounced that right. So, hi Luke, out of everything covered today, what would you say the top methods are to help businesses prepare for the future? So definitely think about the funding, because if you get the funding in place, particularly if you're of the size where bounce back would make a big difference, take the funding. I would suggest take the funding now and you can always repay it. Even with C-bills, if you can take the funding and obviously make the capital repayments from the money you've drawn down, again for 12 months, it's not a big cost. So I would, if any, so I would take the loan. Seriously consider about taking the loans, even if you're not sure you'll need the cash. Take the loan, and you can always repay it. Secondly, it's about cutting costs. It really is. Unfortunately, it's this simple. So it's how essentially the whole exercise is maximizing your cash flow. So taking new funding, cutting your costs, considering how you can sell elsewhere if your business is such that you wouldn't be able to trade through a lockdown to avoid that scenario. So just a final question here, I think, from Julian from Facebook Messenger. So, hi Luke, I would like to apply for the bounce back loan, but how can I show as a freelancer that my cash flow hasn't been expected? I have a limited company that I started last year. So Julian, so with the bounce back loan, actually what you do is you self-certify that you've been negatively affected by coronavirus. It's essentially the bank, you self-certify that you are eligible for the loan. You don't have to show anything to the bank. You self-certify that you are eligible. The main condition is that you've been negatively affected by coronavirus. So check that you qualify because of the incorporation dates of your company, if you're a new business and that type of thing. But other than that, it's very easy to apply because essentially you self-certify, and that's why it's so quick to receive. Typically takes a few days rather than weeks with the C-bill scheme. So hopefully that's clear. So we've got the poll results that I found at the end. So we asked you, have you prepared your business for the next 6 months? So 17% of you said yes, and 83% answered no. So yeah, guys, so pretty much as I said before, you really need to focus on maximizing the cash flow. Consider whether you're eligible for funding. If you are, I would suggest you take it just in case you need it, because you don't want to be in the situation where you run out of cash and actually you can't, you're scrabbling to pay the payroll because you don't have enough cash in the bank. Secondly, cut costs wherever possible. Everyone's considering employee costs, which are generally the biggest cost, but also other costs. Think about the other costs, the other significant costs that your business has. Can you reduce those where possible? And alternatively, how can you sell your product, your service during a lockdown, or if we face further restrictions? How can you continue to trade? So I think that's all we have time for. So if anyone has any questions, please get in touch with the QuickBooks support team on Facebook or contact me on luke.bath@alliotts.com. Coming up on Ask the Expert tomorrow is Dino Myers-Lamptey, who is the founder of The Barber Shop, which is a strategy-led creative company that aims to solve the biggest business problems through data distribution and disruptive ideas. Dino works with startup companies through to large corporations. So tune in and get his advice from a strategy expert. So a reminder that if you need any more advice, join the official Intuit QuickBooks SMB community group on Facebook. Accountants and business experts are on hand 24/7. I'm Luke Bath. Thank you for tuning in today and have a great day.